Hello, hello. I'm Vesa-Matti Hyppönen, and I'm indeed a team lead developer here at Frosmo. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about using the web as a platform for virtual reality. So, some of the topics that we'll be covering today is why you should be interested in virtual reality in the first place, then what platforms to choose to implement virtual reality, how WebVR works, and then we'll touch on progressive enhancement of current websites, and hopefully come to some sort of conclusion about the technology as a whole. So, why should you be interested in virtual reality? To the right here, you can see a graph that shows the adoption of technology or innovation through time. And related to virtual reality, we are still in the early adopters phase. So a lot of customers online, they haven't either had virtual reality experiences or they don't own their own hardware. But virtual reality is being adopted at an increasing rate all the time. So that makes this an excellent opportunity to associate your brand with a leading-edge experience in virtual reality. It also offers a totally new medium, and a medium I feel that has some unique key features. For example, the users of a virtual reality content, they are completely immersed in the experience. They literally will be blind and deaf to the outside world. So they will be 100% focused on the content that you are providing. This gives a really good chance to affect the customer's moods with lighting effects, sounds and visuals. And one of those tools that is quite powerful, especially if you've never actually experienced yourself, is the stereoscopic vision, which is basically a perception of depth. Some of the ways that virtual reality is currently being used online is breaking news in 360, transporting the user into the middle of the action, whatever's happening. Real estate is using it pretty heavily to kind of showcase new homes online, and it does excel in, like virtual reality in general excels in explaining the size of products and understanding how much space something requires, for example. So what platforms then to choose to implement virtual reality? There's basically two options. You can go native solutions, which means that you will be targeting each platform separately. You have Android, iOS, macOS, Windows. There's a lot of different platforms to target. And then the other option really is the web, which will target all these platforms with a single code base. So then the native application VR experience. Imagine yourself looking for a new home online. You find one that you would like to really explore more closely. You click on the link for the VR content, but you're directed to the App Store. You install the application, wait for it to download, launch the application, but you still have to navigate that application to find the apartment that you were wishing to explore. And then you can move to VR mode. But on WebVR, the experience is much more streamlined because it's all happening in the browser. You have the link to the VR content, and you are instantly viewing VR content. So it removes, it removes the barrier of entry for a lot of consumers. You're not losing customers each step of the way, since there's only one step. It also gives you peace of mind that you know that all your consumers are viewing the latest content available with the latest software that you have provided. You don't have to wait for people to download and install updates. And it also gives a chance to give an experience to people who don't have headsets yet. And this is called progressive enhancement. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And a very important key feature, obviously, of the internet is that sharing content is easy as linking. From the technical perspective, WebVR is looking pretty good too. The actual language used is JavaScript. Like I said before, it is cross-platform, cross-device, so you're not targeting all the platforms separately. A lot less overhead there. And you can use existing tools to gather and analyze the user's behavioral data. And this data can also, for example, segmentation from your original website. You can use that segmentation inside the VR content and vice versa. So personalizing content is pretty simple across the website and the VR content. So how does WebVR actually work? It is a JavaScript API, and it provides some capabilities that the hardware has, for example, like position orientation, head tracking, and input devices, such as maybe this one. To the right, you can see the major browsers and their current support for the WebVR API. Most notably, you have Firefox, which has support in the stable branch since August. Chrome is following closely behind. They're due to release a version later this year. They're just still waiting for the next installment of the API. But even though some of the browsers don't have native support yet, they can be polyfilled to have support. The actual rendering of the VR content is done through WebGL, and we'll have a quick look at what WebGL is. It's a JavaScript API for rendering 3D content, specifically OpenGL ES2 content. And this content is rendered to an HTML5 canvas element. This element can then be placed anywhere on your website. And all major browsers and platforms support WebGL, have done so for years, and the performance is excellent even on older mobile devices. So let's talk a little bit about progressive enhancement. What does this mean? So there's a whole variety of different hardware that your users will have when using your website. So if they have a VR setup, a mobile one might look like this. You have a cardboard, smartphone, and together they form a head-mounted display. A little bit more sophisticated would be a computer, some positional tracking cameras for room scale movement, so you can actually move inside the space, and a separate head-mounted display. You might also have a pointer device to point to things in the scene. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg, at least considering the current user base. So most people will still be on desktops, mobiles, tablets. And there's no reason we can't provide them with an experience for VR also. In the simplest case, on desktop, you could drag to look around and click to interact. On tablet and mobile, you can use the phone's sensors and the actual device as a window into the scene you are in. And obviously, headsets will provide head tracking and room scale if you have hardware to support that. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, all browsers can be supported through polyfills, even though they don't have native support right now. This means that you can gradually start adding VR content. You don't need to target all of the different you don't need to target everyone at once. You can start with the lowest common denominator, for example, desktops or mobiles, if that's more your thing. The development cycle is pretty fast because it's using exactly the same workflows as deploying existing websites. And also, there's a lot of big players on the market providing frameworks which make content creation and, well, in general, VR development easier. So in conclusion, VR is in baby shoes. It's a time of opportunity there to get your name out in a totally kind of new medium. The bonus is that early adopters of technology are usually remembered. And WebVR gives an opportunity to target your full audience instead of specifically targeting each platform separately. And you can do so in gradual investments with progressive enhancement. Also, the performance of WebVR is pretty much on par with native solutions. Thank you.